Welcome to the Bay. You know, choosing the right GPU for that 1440p sweet spot, it's one of the toughest calls for any PC builder. And today, we've got two absolute heavy hitters in our sights from NVIDIA's new Blackwell fleet, the RTX 5070 and its bigger, beefier sibling, the RTX 5070 Ti. So which one is the right piece of hardware to dock in your rig? Let's figure it out. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to kick things off with a little showdown, then jump straight into in-game performance. After that, we'll look under the hood at the specs, talk about price versus performance, a big one, and then we'll help you figure out which card is the one for you. I mean, this is the big moment, isn't it? You've got your case, your CPU is all snug in its socket, and now it's time for the heart of your gaming rig. And that GPU choice for 1440p, well, it defines everything, from those buttery smooth frame rates to whether you can crank ray tracing to the absolute max. It's a huge decision. So let's just cut right to the chase. Drawing from our source material over at bestgpusforgaming.com, here's the quick verdict. The RTX 5070, that's your efficiency king. It's the smart, super capable choice for awesome 1440p gaming. But the 5070 Ti, well, it comes out swinging with more VRAM and just raw power for anyone who wants that extra headroom for the future. You can see they're really two different philosophies for the same goal. Okay, enough talk. Let's get to what really matters. Forget the marketing, forget the fancy boxes. Let's look at the raw numbers. How do these cards actually perform when you fire up a game and push them to their limits? And wow, this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? At 1440p ultra settings, the 5070 Ti consistently, and I mean consistently, pulls ahead. Just look at Warzone, we're talking 210 FPS versus 185. Or even in Starfield, it's pushing a much smoother 88 FPS. Now, don't get me wrong, the 5070 is an absolute beast, but that Ti model just gives you a bigger performance buffer in every single game. You know, sometimes a table of numbers doesn't really hit home. This does. In a super demanding game like Cyberpunk 2077, with all the eye candy turned on, that performance gap is about 14 frames per second. That's that classic 10 to 15% uplift we're seeing. And if you're a high refresh rate gamer, you know that can be the difference between feeling good and feeling great. So what happens if you decide to jump up to a 4K monitor? Well, that gap gets even wider. The extra horsepower in the 5070 Ti makes it a way more comfortable 4K card, hitting that golden 60 FPS mark much more often. The standard 5070? It can still hang, for sure, but you're going to be leaning on NVIDIA's DLSS as a bit of a crutch to get there. So we've seen the results. We know the T is faster. But why? It's not magic, so let's pop the hood and take a look at the specs that are actually causing this performance difference. What's the real story on the silicon? And boom, right here, this is what's driving that performance, the memory. It's not just that the 5070 Ti has more VRAM, 16 gigs versus 12, it's that it has a much wider 256-bit memory bus. That's a huge deal. Of course, more power means more, well, power. It draws more from the walls, so you gotta make sure your PSU is up to the task. A 750-watt unit is really your safe harbor here. Let's break that down for a second, because it's super important. Think of the memory bus like a highway. The 192-bit bus on the 5070 is a perfectly good 3-lane highway. But that 256-bit bus on the Ti, that's a 4-lane superhighway. It means more data can get to the GPU core all at once, which prevents traffic jams, especially when you're throwing massive textures and complex ray tracing at. But here's something that's really important to remember. These cards are siblings, built on the exact same foundation. They're both part of the Blackwell family. That means you get all the latest goodies no matter which one you pick. 5th-gen tensor cores, next-gen ray tracing, and the absolute magic of DLSS 4. The core features are identical. The Ti just has more raw hardware to flex with. Okay, we've talked performance, we've talked specs. Now for the part of the journey that hits the wallet. Let's talk about the value proposition. How much more does all that extra performance actually gonna cost you? And there it is, $200. That's the typical price gap we're looking at. And, you know, that is not pocket change. That's a high-quality SSD, that's a RAM upgrade, that's a huge chunk of a brand new gaming monitor. This right here is the central conflict of this entire decision. You know, this chart tells the value story perfectly. This is one of my favorite ways to look at GPUs. When you break it down to the average frames per second you get for every single dollar you spend, the standard RTX 5070 actually comes out on top. So let's be clear, while the 5070 Ti is the faster card, the 5070 is technically the smarter purchase from a pure value perspective. All right, so we have the performance data, we have the specs, we have the price. Let's bring it all into the harbor and deliver the final verdict. Based on who you are and what you need, which of these GPUs should you actually buy? It really just boils down to this. Let's see which camp you're in. If you're a value-focused gamer and you just want a killer 1440p experience without destroying your bank account, the RTX 5070 is a no-brainer. But if you're chasing those super high refresh rates, maybe you're thinking about 4K down the line, or you're a streamer or creator who needs that extra VRAM, then yeah, the RTX 5070 Ti is the smarter, more future-proof investment. And hey, a huge shout out to our source for this explainer, bestgpusforgaming.com. If you want to dive even deeper, compare more cards, or just geek out on more hardware guides, that is absolutely the place to go. And that brings us to the end of our chart. We've laid out the performance, the specs, the value, and now the final choice really just comes down to your budget and your ambition. So the big question is, which GPU will you be docking in your build? Keep it cool and keep building.